Hi, Paul. It's so good to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me for this interview. And I would like to just introduce myself to the listeners who haven't heard of me before. I'm Coach Retha, and my speciality is to help people in their personal and professional lives to not just cope and be okay in their environment, but to excel in their environments and habitats so that they can be their best selves. I focus more on individual coaching, but we also do at the Time Factory, we do teams and teams analysis through the Shadow Match program, which we love and use as an AI coaching system and administrative system. But Paul, please introduce yourself to the audience and let's just get to know you better as well.
Thank you, Rita, for this chance. So I empower individuals to transform companies. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, if I empower you to be a better leader, you can have an impact in your organization, and that has a massive effect. If we can really get people to work within their space and unlock their own leadership skills, then they can be better employees and better leaders in their organization. And then that by nature will transform the company. So there, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
That is so amazing, Paul. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what I would like to ask you is building on what you just said. You and I had a discussion. We met in person. We had a discussion like coaching is growing in the corporate and business environment. However, it's not booming. And what do you think are the reasons for that? Because we would like to see it like just explode but it's not happening. Why do you think that's the case?
Rita, I think in an anecdotal analysis, I see in America it's booming. I see companies and countries that have a different mindset. It's definitely growing. In South Africa, traditionally, and I've been coaching on my own for about 9 years in the corporate environment for at least 4 or 5 years. So it's about 15, 16 years that I've been coaching. And it's amazing in the South African context, people see coaching as a way of improving something that's bad. It sounds horrible, but you're doing something wrong, so we need to coach you. Where in America, that says you want to do something better, let me coach you. So that's just what I've observed.
So it's so interesting that you say that because one of my questions were around, do you think there's a stigma? But I think that's exactly there's a stigma being created around coaching. If you've done something wrong, you need to be coached. And do you have any idea how we can change that perhaps? Because that's our challenge, right?
It's small changes. I think people like myself and you working in the coaching industry through your training of coaches and making them aware, and making an awareness at a management and a senior management level does it slowly but surely. I wish we had a magic wand to do it, but the challenge is we don't.
Yeah.
But I think it's also a way of looking at how you approach it. I think the most successful people in the world, and that's really where I draw my inspiration from, the most successful people in the world have a coach, and they pay a fortune. I mean, if you look at the soccer coaches, the rugby coaches, these guys are paid in six-figure dollar salaries, because they are empowering their team to be better. They're not brought on and paid a couple of $100 million just to, make these people a little bit better. They bring them to the top. So they're already in the top percentile. They're moving them over the edge. So I just came from a client this morning where he says, your impact has had a major impact on our bottom line. So I said, well, how much? He says, well, look, I don't know whether it's all towards you, but our increase has gone up 725%. So it's like we were just coaching him on delegation as a leader. He was doing everything himself. Yes. And when I went to see him, his desk, he's a general manager in a large corporate. His desk was full of papers. I said, in this? He says, well, no, his team are not getting around to this, so he's helping them. And he thinks that it just doesn't want to have come back to him, so he's doing it. So I said, let's we can do this a little bit differently. And he's telling me now he's going home earlier. He's spending weekends with his family. And that's the impact of that is I've made a good person who was working really hard more effective. And when he showed me the percentage, I said, well, look, you can pay me 720% more now that I'm helping you. But I don't think it works quite like that.
Yeah. But that's such a great example because This morning I was at a meeting and there was a wish list that what do people wish for? And most people wish for more time, right? And that what you help this client of yours to do is create more time, more effective time. And that is priceless. You can't even put a price to that, right? Because yes, the company bottom line, you could see a difference. But the measurement, and I think that's where coaching is struggling because the measurements isn't always tangible. And many times the measurement or the effect of the coaching is priceless. You cannot really put a price tag on it. You could if you force it into that, but I think that's where the one thing that people don't get is the effect of coaching spills over, not even from your professional, but into your personal life. Because I also like to have that effect always. Like if we can change your personal and professional life at the same time, why not? And that is amazing. And it's really, really so. Number one, if people want to use their time more effectively, get a coach, right? But what other people would, in your mind, could really benefit, like have a if experience the effect of coaching in their lives?
It's a broad question. I mean, one's got to look at what I have noticed in the coaching that I've done is I've tried to become more focused on people who have a major impact. You know, so let's say a general manager that impacts 3,000 people has a higher impact than a business owner who's employing 2 people. Although it's the same type of coaching, each coaching system is unique. I
Yes.
think from an impact in the world, it's far better to have an impact on the larger companies. But that said, the larger companies are more difficult because if you understand a system has an input, has a process, and an output. Too many people view a company as a closed system. In other words, if we work hard, we do this, we sell it, we'll grow. The trouble is you're sitting with people. It's not a closed system. It's an open system, and people, depending on how their gate motor or their dog reacted or their wife spoke to them that morning, it's different. So we're working with variable factors. So for me, the ideal person to coach is that, and that's what I'm doing now in this organization, is I'm empowering him to empower his direct reports, and those people will empower. So if we start at the top and we roll it down, that is, I think, the way of getting the coaching vibe different, to get the negative attitude that we moving you from maybe a 0 to a hero. We're not taking you from negative to 0. we we're boosting you to your full potential up here. We're not, just bringing you up so that you can perform. We're really empowering you. So start at the top and work down. And if that works, I don't have to do the work because he believes me and says, wow, this is good. So I said, well, do it in your team. If he does it well in his team, they will say, wow, they'll do it in their teams. And before you know it, 1 or 2 coaching interventions of 6 months has a knock-on effect on, could be 3,000 people.
Exactly. And that is so important. And I have found in some companies where I found leadership to be very resistant towards coaching. And what you just said is so, so, so important because the effect that leader can have on the rest of the company is phenomenal. And I agree so much with you because um I've coached a woman who what she is the owner of a company, CEO of the company, and she's struggled with exactly that effective use of time. And sometimes you just need somebody to sit with you and work out a few things and make it simple, make it practical. It had such an effect on her life. Her husband called me and said, you can't even imagine what you've done for us and how you freed up our time. And because the effect it had on her also helped her husband save time in the bigger scheme of things and helped him more with their family time and quality time at home. And it just had such a ripple effect. And then into the company as well, it had a ripple effect where she could tell people, look, but you're not using your time effectively. Let's sit. She didn't need to get me in as a coach now to coach her people, she could do it. And I know there's a lot of companies who are appointing leaders and they're sending them on coaching courses, then they want them to coach. As a matter of fact, they struggle to get the time to coach people. I think people should be coached. And we also do that. And I know you also, a coach also needs a coach.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I wanted to say. Apart from that, we think everybody needs a coach, right? So let's put that aside. But if you have coaches in your company, they also need coaching. And they need development as well. And I'm very strict with that, with the coaches who work with me, that they are busy with self-development, that they set aside, schedule some time for their self-development. And that includes being coached. And I think sometimes that also gets neglected in companies. If there's already a coach, that coach needs a coach. If we look at counselors and people like that, they need coaching as well. They need that support, and it can just enhance their life. No damage can be done, right? It can just work out very well and maybe change their life forever going forward. So yeah, I love your top to bottom approach, because as you said, that's where you can make the most impact. And I like that idea. And I'm definitely going to focus on it more myself within companies, because it will make a difference. Because I have a passion for the people at the bottom to also coach. And at the Time Factory, we do both. But the real impact is seen from the top. I totally agree with you there.
I just want to, you mentioned the negativity and the resistance to coaching. I think another
Mm.
aspect that influences that, and this comes back 2,500 years ago when Socrates said, "Know thyself." I
Yes.
don't think enough people look at themselves and want to know themselves. Now, both of us use the Shadow Match tool, which shows you a profile of 19 neural pathways from your most active to your most passive one. And it's actually scary when people say to you, "Oh, how do you know me so well?" I said, "Well, look, you answered the questions and I'm just looking at your graph." The
Yes.
question is, do you know yourself? Did you know this about yourself? And so many people said, I didn't actually realize that that was the reason. For me, one of my lowest ones is routine. And I've got to have systems around me to build a routine, because if I don't do that, but I'm high in innovation, I'm high in problem solving. So if I use innovation and problem solving to drive routine, so much easier. But if we go back to the Greek philosophers, know thyself, I think too many people don't want to know themselves. So the resistance comes from individuals as well. So you talk about leaders in organizations. What are you going to tell me? And I think also consultants have got a bit of a bad rap around this, because you go into an organization and coaching is all about asking questions. And I think people are more or prefer giving an answer, and managers, I will give you the answer instead of letting the person solve it themselves. So, tied to those two things, know thyself and also asking questions and not dictating, are two ways that we can help promote coaching.
That's so true. I like what you said there. It is so, so true, and a very important thing. And thank you so much for bringing up the shadow match coaching system. I just want to say as well, because I've also realized during my coaching path, that I meet people at companies who've been coached and it didn't work out for them because people weren't using a specific coaching system. And I'm not saying everybody's a bad coach. I'm not saying that, right? But there are some people out there who give coaches a bad name. And that's why I prefer the shadow match coaching system, because first of all, it's based on data.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, you can give the company who is paying a lot of money for the coaching, you can give them a report. You can show them the improvement. And even in a 6-month period, you can show them how this person has improved, and based on facts. And that I like as well, because I I personally don't want to just go in and coach somebody, but what measurements are in place? What data is in place? And how do I know, if I give you my money, that you can show me a return on investment, or that you can show me that you are actually coaching in what you're doing? And that's how I really love about the shadow match system, is that you can go into companies with data, with concrete proof that what you've done and the impact thereof on this person's habits and behaviors and how it has affected them. And even not just habits and behaviors, but their assertiveness. And I've got a few case studies which show that you can improve somebody's assertiveness in the right way if you work on that. And look, it takes a bit of time, but it can make a difference because sometimes new leaders come into positions and they're good at their job, they're good at what they do, but they could possibly, I'm not saying it's always the case, not have enough tools to do the job assertively enough, or they feel like they're not making an impact because of a communication skill that they're lacking. And coaching can help them with that. I mean, there's so many things coaching can help with. These are just one. But that's the one thing I've also realized, that sometimes coaches go in and they don't have reports, they don't have data, they cannot prove without giving away confidential information what they've done. And I think the shadow match system allows us to do that, which I'm very grateful for, and the way it's been constructed. So I think if you're a company owner and you want to invest in coaching, get a shadow match coach, because they can give you reports, they can show you things, they can show you what they're doing without giving any confidential discussions away or dig into that. So that is really important to know. And if you appoint another coach, make sure that you get some feedback from that coach, that it's not just coaching and people a year down the line, that person cannot remember or implement the actions that was agreed upon. And that also happens sometimes. I get people who've been coached. I ask them, okay, what did you achieve with the coaching? What did you have a goal? Did you measure it? Did you? And they're like, I can't really remember what we discussed and what was done and what I achieved. And to me, that is shocking, because I don't want to be a coach like that. I want to make an impact forever in somebody's life, not just temporary.
Can I add to that as well? I think, how many people do you know that have started a diet and actually finished the diet?
Very few.
Yeah,
Very few.
and the
And I
reason
can include myself there, right?
you don't have to give too much information there. But if you think of that, most of those people have a very almost big, hairy, audacious goal. I want to lose 50 kilograms in the next 3 months or whatever.
Yeah.
What we've seen, and I think the success of certain types of coaching, it's about small steps. And if you've ever read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, you'll understand those little things. And that's what we as coaches should be doing. We are guiding people on a process where they are learning about themselves, first of all, and they're learning how a right way of doing it. And I want to use a practical example. I'm a keen cyclist, and I can't remember when, what bicycle I was riding at the age of 6, but I remember when I started, I had training wheels. And those training wheels protected my knees and my elbows and everything, until I built up the confidence to ride without the training wheels. And then the bike, then I got overconfident and fell, and then you resist a little bit. But it's a process of small little things. Eventually, you spend enough time in the saddle, you train, and you complete the Cape Town cycle tour. Then you do. I haven't done the Tour de France yet. It's not on my bucket list. But I can tell you now, if I went from cycling on my little bicycle with the 4 wheels, the 2 stabilizer wheels, and the bicycle's 2 wheels, and I suddenly went from there to complete my first 20, 30, 40, 100 kilometer, I would never have done it. And when it comes to weight loss and stuff like that, people see it and then they blame the coach. But I also blame the coach, but the coach has got to reflect what you as an individual are doing. And if I'm not helping you do those little things every day, every week, every month, it's not going to happen. And there's a lot of disillusionment when it comes to coaching, because people pay a fortune to be coached and they say it didn't help. And then that negative, we battle as coaches to break that negative cycle, because people look at this and say, it's not going to work. I'm not going to coach my team. I'm not going to spend money because it's not going to work. So, please tell me about your previous experience. And then you hear these horror stories of, oh, my coach said I could lose 50 kilograms in 6 months.
Sure, it's very true, and I want to build on your analogy with regards to the bike. The same is true for the action you take. The only way you learn how to ride a bike, and I'm stealing this quote from Peter de Villiers, right? So the only way you learn how to ride a bike is to actually ride the bike. You got to get on the bike and take action. If you read about how to ride a bike, you can read the whole book, every process, have everything in place, and you still won't be able to ride a bike. You've got to take actions, and it's the small actions, those micro actions, as James Clear calls them in his book, they build on each other. And I also just want to, in the corporate environment, in a business environment, never mind the corporate, any business environment, it's so imperative that the client takes small steps which fits into their life as well. Because sometimes if you take them outside of their life as a coach and the actions are not practical, it also the client struggles to implement them, and I think that's just a coach to coach thing. As you said, it's like I can blame the coach because the coach also needs to make sure that a client can do what you asking and what they commit to do, that it's possible and practical. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love stories and anecdotal information. I was talking to a coach the other day. She's done a formal coaching course, and she just said she's battling with this one client. I happened to be through another intervention. I had the client's shadow match. The client has 8 brothers and sisters, and their team inclination is a strong habit. Now, anyone that knows shadow match, that's above 50. And so pretty much plus 50% of the day, you can do teamwork. His
Yes.
individual habit or
Yes.
behavior is something like 17.
Oh
So
wow,
this,
it's a behavior. It's not a habit.
yeah,
It's very low.
he's
Yes.
got to plan it. He's literally got to think about what he's going to do and plan it. It's not even a necessary habit. He doesn't like doing it. And she said,
Yeah.
we're talking about things. He says he's going to do it, but he doesn't do it. So then I gave her feedback. I said, look, I have a bit of inside information. He happens to have a shadow match with me. Let me talk about this and give you some insight in terms of
Yeah.
what his neural pathways are saying. So I said,
Yeah.
if you give him something where he has to work on his own to
Mm.
complete that task, I can tell you now, the chances that he's going to do it, unless you are WhatsApping him, emailing him, and calling him every day, the
Yeah.
chances are almost 17% that he actually will do that. 17 out of 100.
Yes.
And she said, now it makes perfect sense because she's asking him and he says he's going to do it. But actually, what he wants is he wants a team of 8 people around him before he does it.
Yes. So when
Because
he wants a buddy, he needs to buddy up.
and the coach is not that person because it's one person, and once again it's a person of color. They're both people of color, but there's a respect issue, and it's just
Mm.
and that was fascinating to me. And I said, well, does this make sense now? And she says, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
when you try and force your brain to do something that it's not accustomed to doing, and let's go back to the analogy. Peter
Mm.
also says you can't learn to ride a bike by chewing gum.
Yes.
You also
Yes.
can't.
That's what he said. Yes. Exactly. Thank you for that. Yes.
So imagine sitting on a bicycle. Now I've done hundreds, thousands of kilometers on a bicycle. So imagine sitting on that bicycle now, turning around, facing the back, taking your arms and swapping them over, and now trying to run left is right and right is left. You won't be able to do it for the
Yeah.
first couple of hours
Yes. Yes.
until your brain learns that, okay, left is actually right, front is actually back, and I don't know where I'm going, so I need someone to guide me. Until
Yeah.
you get that right, and this is where us as coaches have almost a competitive advantage over people that don't have shadow match.
Yes.
We know what their neural pathway looks like. So we can say, look, you don't really have the innovation. So let's find a way. And I'm not saying you're stupid or anything like that. I'm just saying your neural pathway is never developed. You've never had to be on your own. You've always been with 8 brothers and sisters around you. So when I put you on your own, you get totally frustrated. He's a
Yes.
wonderful negotiator. He's a great team guy. He's able to, but don't ask him to do it on his own. Now, the same back with the bicycle. Unless I'm doing it, and I can't, fail, and then I've got to have someone say, Paul, do it. Yeah. As coaches, we say, climb back on the bike. Yes, you've hurt yourself, but climb back on the bike. Let's help you. Did you know that you're good at this? So let's use this. And that way we build. So it's these negative perceptions that, our
Mm.
conversations going around why coaching has this negative rap to a certain degree is because society has for years told us what to do. For years, forced us into neural pathway thinking that
Mm.
having to challenge as coaches. And unless you know how the person's brain profile looks and their
Yeah.
neural pathways, it's a bit of a challenge.
Very true. And people come from different backgrounds. And the way you've been brought up, like you said, develop those neuronal pathways. And if you don't have that information at your fingertips, you're going to struggle to coach people. So yeah, we do have an edge. We do have an edge when it comes to that. I feel very, very blessed to have that in my life. So I'm going to keep using it. That's for sure. But Paul, just to end off, in summary or in conclusion, if you had a leader of a company or leadership team in front of you, what would you tell them about coaching so that they can buy into being coached as a leadership team?
I think for me, it's the question: do you want to work harder or work smarter?
Mm.
So for me, it's a leverage. Why we use a wheelbarrow, with long arms and one little pivot wheel there is we have leverage. So if you want to say, do you want to increase, because leadership is influence, all right? So you want
Yeah.
to increase your influence in the organization, you need to leverage what you have. So
Yes.
for me, I would not start with a coaching conversation per se.
Mm.
I would start with how can we leverage what you've got in the organization and then bring that analogy back to coaching? Because if we
Mm.
can use that analogy of a lever, what is the smallest thing that you can do to bring about the biggest change? It's almost like the Pareto. What is the 20% that you can do now that'll bring
Mm.
about 80% change? And let's talk about that. And when we start having that discussion, I say, have you considered coaching? Because if we start off with a coaching conversation, it's almost like
The
a Christian
resistance,
trying
right?
to convince someone who's Muslim or someone who's in a different faith. You cannot.
Mm.
You've got to talk from experience to do that. So what do they want? They want results. So let's talk from the results perspective and then
Mm.
use that in a story. And then I think storytelling as well and
Mm.
anecdotal information is the way that it goes. Case studies and use cases are wonderful
Mm.
ways of doing that. But if we start with a coaching conversation up front, I think we can actually lose.
Yeah.
People will switch off immediately, especially if their perception of coaching has been negative in the past.
Yes, as we just discussed, it happens, and it's a real thing. We cannot ignore that. But I do agree with you because coaching is that one lever you can push to get the most impact out of minimal input. That is such a great way of looking at it. So yeah, if people want to make that impact, and the question would be, can you afford not to? Try
Mm.
it at least, and if you don't want to do the whole leadership team, at least give me one leader. Let's work with one leader and see, and from there you can decide if you want to go further.
I just want to add to it as well, because I think there's also a perception around price as well. And I love what Warren Buffett said. He says, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And I
Yeah.
always use the example, why is it that someone will pay 7 million Rand for a Lamborghini,
Mm-hmm.
but really battle to fork out 500,000 for a utility bucky that has not a well-known brand? It's because there's value in the Lamborghini. So when it comes to coaching, we've got to break the mindset and say, well, I only charge this per hour. What am I enabling? Let's go back to my the manager that I'm working with now. What does 700% mean in your business? What does the 700% increase mean in your effectiveness, in your bottom line, in
Mm-hmm.
time management? And you
Mm-hmm.
start, if you're a 10 million Rand company and I give you 700%
Yeah,
effectiveness, 700 times 10 is 7
exactly.
billion, if I've got it correct. 700 times 10.
Yes, and not even to mention the added benefit of having quality time with his family and for himself.
And how do you measure that? And that is when you come to fulfillment coaching, that is another conversation because we are enabling people to make the right decisions. And that's what coaching does. It's a case of saying, how do we give you the right tools so that you can make the right decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I like that. Paul, thank you so much. This was very insightful for me. And I know I'm gonna send this to my coaches as well to listen to because I think what we discuss is so important as coaches. And as I've told you before, I'm going to try and get Peter de Villiers to do an interview with us as well, and we can have a panel discussion and talk about this more, because I think we've only scratched the surface of the iceberg when it comes to coaching and getting coaching out there and getting it to boom in South Africa specifically. So, as you said, it's coming. We're getting there, right? It is growing, but we really wanted to just grow so much bigger, where possible, and make that impact. But thank you so much for your time and joining me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can do this soon again.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invite.